As regular listeners to the Made in Teasdale podcast are aware, I often ask at the end of each episode if anyone has an interesting story or would like to share their experiences, then please do get in touch. Well, today's guest did in fact do that and has got in touch to share her very interesting story. My name is Simon Henderson. I am Head of History and Sixth Form at Teasdale School, and this is episode 18 of Made in Teasdale.
Made in Teasdale.
And we actually sat there one night watching John Wayne's stage ghostly projected onto the wall while looking down at the scene below.
It is absolutely fascinating seeing inner city London children dropped into the middle of a working farm.
I have very fond memories of growing up in Teasdale. I mean, living in the countryside and having, loads of fresh air, loads of space to play.
It really is the case that if you come from County Durham, and in my case have lived in southwest London for 40 years, County Durham is still what I call home.
Made in Teasdale.
My guest today is Kathy Booth, who was Kathy Simpson when she was at Teasdale School. She left in 2000 and she now works for BBC Look North in the Yorkshire region as a reporter on the television. Here are some clips of her in action, and watch out for some famous faces.
I'm sure that everybody who drives along the M62 has a little smile or a laugh about the position of this farmhouse, and from the air it does look even more strange there in between the two carriageways of the motorway. There are hundreds of people here today from mosques all over Sheffield and Rotherham, and they're all desperate to show their solidarity with the victims of terrorism and to show that the people who carry out these atrocious acts, as we've seen in Manchester and London, are nothing to do with their religion. At 5:41 in the morning, it's minus 3.5 degrees. The roads are quiet and coping well, but what of rush hour? Well, it's just past 8:30 in the morning. This is the A64 York Road between York and Leeds. As you can see, the traffic is moving very well. It seems that a lot of people must have taken heed of advice and stayed at home.
Day one, they were all a little bit nervous with the catering arrangements, whether they were going to be on goat's testicles and urine. But hey,
that's not on your rider then, is it not?
It's not. We look after the crew well, we have fun.
Hello! Yes, welcome to Leeds Festival. The mud out there is really bad, I'm afraid to say.
If your songs were children, do you have a favourite child? Which is your favourite song to perform?
Well, we have many different songs from many different albums, so I think Dakota, I guess, is a song that makes people feel good at the end of the night.
That's a popular child, that is, isn't it?
Popular child,
Yeah.
I mean, if all children behaved like that, we'd have more.
So, hello, Kathy, how are you?
Hello, Simon. I'm very well, thank you very much. Yes, thank you for having me on this Teasdale School podcast.
Well, thanks very much for getting in touch and letting us know about your story. So, with that in mind, can you sketch out for our listeners when you grew up in Teasdale, where you lived, and some of your early experiences in Teasdale?
Absolutely. I'm Barnard Castle born and bred, really. Lived all my life there. My family still live there as well. I grew up in Stainton Village, which is just outside of Barnard Castle, so I had to catch the good old school bus into Teasdale. Yes, and my early years there, I mean, it's lovely, isn't it? It's a wonderful part of the world, but for a young person, it's incredibly remote, and your opportunities are very sort of limited or very far away. And when I think about growing up, I think about getting on that bus at Stainton Village bus stop and going to Darlington. And, you know, Darlington's not great. It's not a massive city, but that was the best that we had to make do with. And it was still like 40 minutes away.
Yeah.
So when I think of growing up, I think of everything being very far apart. And I think people who grow up in a city, they don't appreciate what that's like, and how difficult it can be to be so far away from everything that's exciting in life when you're that age. But no, it was beautiful. And I think about yeah, I had a great group of friends growing up, great group of friends at school, and we would, you know, go to each other's houses as you do when you're that age. And then when we got older, we go to the Turk's Head, which whenever I drive past, you know, there's many a fond memory in there. Yeah, it was a nice place to grow up. And when I left when I was 18, that was the right time for me to spread my wings, definitely.
Yeah. So when you were at the school, what subjects did you gravitate towards? What things were you most interested in?
The arts, the humanities were my bag for sure. I liked English, reading, literature and stories, which I suppose I should, you know, I'm a journalist, obviously, so stories have stayed interesting. Back when I was at school, I was Cathy Simpson, by the way. So if you're thinking, who is Cathy Booth? It was Cathy Simpson back in the day. And I started there in 1992. Wow. I know, yeah, so I'm quite seasoned. Yeah, started in 1992, was there until I finished my A-levels in 2000. So that was my tenure. And yeah, I liked music, I liked performing arts, I liked history, which is your subject, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, although I was before your time. Yeah. Mr. Ingram was my history teacher, and he was so good. He was so passionate about the subject. He wrote books about Napoleon. And he constantly reminded us, our A-level class, he constantly reminded us that the year before us had been excellent. And they'd all got either an A or an A star. Their pictures were literally on the wall in the classroom. We were just trying to live up to them, which of course we didn't. But yeah, so it was music, arts, English, history. That was my kind of thing. And sometimes I wonder if I'd have had more doors open to me if I'd gone down some more scientific routes. But, you know, you make your choices, don't you? And you do your best.
I mean, it sounds like we only briefly missed each other in the passage of time of Teasdale School, because I started at the school in 2001. So it was only a few years, and Mr. Ingram he was the head of history just before my head of history, who took over. So I missed him by about a year or 18 months as well. So yeah, I think you're right. You wonder what would have happened. Sometimes you think that the doors of opportunity to scientific and mathematically minded people are maybe more fully open. However, it strikes me that you have forged ahead with some very interesting opportunities yourself. So talk to us about university, and then how that led to where you are working now.
Yes, well, I left Teasdale School with, I think it was like 2 Bs and 2 Cs at A-level and a little cheeky AS level. And yeah, I wanted to study English. I wanted to go to Leeds University. I wasn't quite clever enough for them. And I got in at Leeds Metropolitan University, which is now Leeds Beckett, to study English literature. And it was great. And I chose Leeds because, as well as the universities, the city really appealed to me, and I still live here now. It's still where I am today. So yeah, I did the English literature course, but more than anything, I just spent my university time figuring out who I was, figuring out how to be a grown-up, and you know, when I went to university, I couldn't use a washing machine, which I'm embarrassed about now. It's not hard. I figured it out. And,
so you needed that more scientific and mathematical training, you see.
I'll tell you another thing. When we were talking earlier about points of transition where maybe doors open and doors close, an interesting one was my brother went to Barnard Castle School.
Okay.
And I had that choice of going to that school when I was younger, when I was 11, and I took the entry exam, and I would have been the first year that they took girls. Okay. And I got offered a place, and I had that decision to make. Do I go for that place at Barnard Castle School, be the first year of girls, or do I go to Teasdale? And I thought about it, and I chose Teasdale, obviously, because the school day finishes at 3 and you don't have to go on a Saturday. Yeah. Whereas at Barnard Castle School, they're there till 5, and you know, and they have to go on Saturdays. And yeah, and I sometimes think if I'd have gone to that private school, would that have opened more doors for me? I don't know. I'd have no regrets whatsoever. And my brother did well, and I did well as well in different ways. So there's no right or wrong answer, is there? You just make your decision at the time.
No. I think you make your decision, and then you try and use what you've got to open as many doors for you as you can. So you currently work for the BBC. Now, oftentimes I think, and I interviewed Paul Jenkinson, who for a previous episode of this podcast, and Paul worked for the BBC World Service for 20 years, and is currently doing a teacher training placement at Teasdale School. And one of the things that he said in his interview was that you often think, oh, he works for the BBC, or she works for the BBC, or they're a journalist. Oh, I wonder how they did that, or they must have known somebody, or they must have known that. And he said oftentimes, actually, it's just about working hard and trying to take opportunities that come in your direction.
Yeah, there's definitely more than one way to skin a cat when it gets to this kind of thing. And I guess the people who want it the most and who have those opportunities tend to be the ones, and sometimes you do have to throw yourself at that brick wall a few times before you break through. So how I do, yes, I do work for the BBC. I'm so proud to say that, and I've worked there since 2006 on their Look North, which is different to the one that you get up there, but yeah, it's the Yorkshire Look North. It's watched by about 500,000 viewers a night. It's a big thing, and I'm a journalist there. So I got to this point by the first foot in the door was work experience, and they had an advert on their website for 10 weeks of work experience in the press office at Leeds, and it was unpaid, which I mean that's a fact, isn't it? That
yeah, you got to want it.
If I hadn't, well, you've got to want it, and you've got to be able to afford it. Now, I was really fortunate, and I had support from my family, and if you don't have that, that's not on, really, is it? So I think that's something that is a challenge that needs to be met by a lot of media and a lot of businesses, not just the media. Anyway, luckily I was in a position to take advantage of that. So I went to a job interview for this work experience. I said that I watched all the programs, which I did actually. And they were so impressed that I actually watched the output, that they gave me that work experience. And I was there for 10 weeks pottering on. And and at the end of it, the lady who was running the work experience scheme said to me, do you want to work in press and PR, or do you want to work for the BBC? What is it that you enjoy? And without a hesitation, it's the BBC. It's so, I love telly. I love all of that stuff. And so I wanted to stay there. So I went over to the bus station, which is opposite the BBC in Leeds. And I went to one of those machines that make business cards, and I put my coins in, and I made a little rubbish business card. And I went to everybody that I'd met in Look North and said, if you hear of any work, please let me know, because at the end of this week, this pass isn't going to work anymore, and I'm not going to be able to get in the building again. So it was that step of, yes, I got the work experience, but then I took it a step further, and I made sure that people knew who I was. And fortunately for me, one of the people I'd met was the editor of Look North, and he said, well, can you count backwards? And I was like, yes, even though I didn't have that maths background. I still can manage that. So they trained me up as a news transmission assistant, which is the person in the gallery talking to the presenters saying, shut up in 10, 9, 8, 7. And we make the whole programme run on time. And it's such a great, exciting job. Communication is at the heart of it, communicating with the technical staff in the gallery and the presenters and whatever else. And that's where I started, and that progressed. And then slowly, it turned into more journalism opportunities, which was, again, that thing of putting yourself out there and saying, well, I have a story, I'd like to do this.
Yeah.
And here we are all this time later.
It's like my gran, bless her, always says, shy Ben's getting out.
My dad says shy girls don't get sweets.
There you go.
And whenever I say it, people go, oh, that sounds weird.
Yeah.
But it's obviously a Northeast thing.
Yeah.
And shy girls don't get sweets. So every now and then I think of my dad and just go for it.
And I think one of the things that you said, as a head of sixth form, I get a lot of emails, traffic through about work experience opportunity here and work experience opportunity there. And, the point that you made about it being unpaid, so you've got to be able to do that. Nowadays, I would say 60% of the stuff that I get sent, you've got to pay to actually do the experience. So you've got to pay to get on this virtual or this real work experience opportunity, and I think that's something that it does hold a lot of people back who can't necessarily afford to go and get the experience, and it does lead to a lot of inequality and opportunity, I would suggest.
Well, it does. Then you end up with a workforce that's less diverse, less interesting, and then you end up with problems further down the line, and it stems from how people are brought in.
So you've transitioned then from the person that goes 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, off you go, to somebody who's actually, someone's in your ear telling you what you have to do and what you don't have to do. So tell me about let's try pre-pandemic, a day in the life of Cathy Booth, BBC reporter.
Pre-pandemic, let's just think on that for a moment. So yes, a day in the life. I mean, my favourite days are the days when somebody has already found a story and set it all up for you. So, I mean, sometimes they're your own ideas and you set it all up and you do a lot of work in advance. And other times it's like, Cathy, go and do this. So a day in the life would be you in advance, the day before, you'd get contacted by the producer and say, oh, we want you to go to Barnsley. You're going to be doing this. And and then you get up and you travel to the place and you meet your camera crew. And I mean, sometimes you have a camera crew. Sometimes these days we do it all ourselves. So you have to be able to film, you have to be able to edit. And the person that you see in that news report, certainly on the BBC, they've done it all. It's not like somebody writes your script, somebody cuts your pictures. You know, you're doing everything. And then you travel and you go and you film, and sometimes you might do something called an as live for lunch, which is that we've got the lunchtime bulletin, and you don't have time to tell the whole story in time for the lunch bulletin. So you might just sort of do a little piece to camera and interview a guest, and then say you can find out more on Look North at 6:30. You knock one of those out, send it over the internet, and then do your main piece for the programme. And the most exciting thing is that, you know, your day builds to this point at 6:30, and then it all, you know, everything happens on the telly and it's really exciting, and then boom, it's finished. And then tomorrow start again with something else. And that's one of my favourite things about news, is that you seldom on these big long projects that go on and interrupt your sleep. You know, you're just like, what now? And it's quite an exciting, and you have to be able to roll with that and think on your feet.
Yeah, I think it's interesting what you said about you kind of do it all yourself. We when the school got some pretty stellar A-level results a couple of years ago, we had, just because he works in the BBC doesn't necessarily mean you'll know who he is, but we had Luke Walton, who was a reporter for Look North in our region, and he came to do a story. And I was sort of fascinated by watching the whole process, because he'd turn up in the morning, he asked me a few questions, he had one cameraman with him, and he was sort of scoping out some shots, and then he then did a little piece outside where he put a tie on, but the camera, you could only see from the waist up, so he had his tie on, so it made it look like he was all dressed smart, but he wasn't necessarily, because then he took his tie off and he was just chatting to the kids who'd got their results. And then off he went, and just him and his cameraman just sat in this little truck in the car park, obviously putting their edit together. And then, as you say, at lunchtime there was a little version of it, and then later on there was the full version of it. But it makes me wonder how much, even in the relatively short space of time that you've worked at the BBC, since the time you were doing work experience to now, how much has the advance in technology changed the way in which news reporting takes place?
Yeah, it has changed and evolved. But certainly when I started, it was the tail end of you had a craft editor, you had a dedicated sound man, you had the reporter, and you had these big teams of people who would just specialize in one thing. And goodness me, they had it pretty sweet. Whereas now, and actually, really, the technology advances since then have been significant. But the biggest changes have really been in the past 5 years. You know, with mobile phone camera technology, everybody's a journalist.
Yeah.
And the pandemic itself has hurtled it forward even further, an extreme degree. How much of the changes that we've seen in the past year will actually live on as a legacy, I don't know. I mean, all these Zoom interviews, everything that we do, pretty much 98% of everything that we do is on Zoom now. And we're putting out stuff that in the past we wouldn't have touched with a barge pole. I remember interviews recorded on Skype. We'd say, well, this is really poor quality. The picture quality is dreadful. We're not putting this out, and we'd scrap it. And now it's all we're doing, you know, this sound quality. And at the end of the day, you sort of have to think to yourself, well, we're broadcasting in a global pandemic, so whatever we get out is pretty good achievement.
Yeah.
But yeah, the technology has changed a great deal. And like you say, editing in the back of a van, that's what we do. We sit in car parks and we edit in a van, and it's dead exciting. It's great. You know, it is a fun way to work, really.
I think it's interesting because in one of the other podcasts we did, we had some lads who one of them now, Oliver Smith, he's a filmmaker. He lives in Barnard-Castle, and when he was in sixth form, they were in sixth form 2004, 2005. They were sort of getting into filmmaking, but actually they were using like an old-fashioned, as it would be now, video recorder with an actual little mini tape in it. And so when they were doing it, they were like, well, we've only got a certain amount of tape that we can use today, because we haven't got any more tapes. And then he was then one of the first kids to actually get a laptop and start to get some editing material. But when they produced their little films that they used to make, it was pre-YouTube. YouTube didn't come along until just after they had been doing this. So it meant that people would ask him, can I see that video you made? And they'd have to actually physically sit and watch it on his laptop, because he couldn't just say, well, here's the link to my YouTube page or something like that. Do you think, because I've noticed watching the news that it is everything now is a guest is in their own kitchen or in their own living room or whatever. Do you think it'll mean that once all this is over, BBC, TV news, BBC, it'll just go back to inviting guests into the studio because that's how it once was? Or do you think that certainly with the environmental advantages of not getting somebody to travel somewhere, the expense that causes, do you think this could just be the norm now, that if you do an interview with somebody, you do it remotely?
I think it'll end up being a combination of both. I mean, anything that we shoot ourselves or we get people in the studio, it just looks fantastic because we're professionals. However, the ease of getting people to do interviews when all they have to do is open a laptop or hold their phone up, you can get stuff so easily, so quickly. And even sometimes, if we just need a little clip from somebody, 20-second little soundbite, we've even taken to asking people to record it on WhatsApp. Why do you need to set up an entire rigmarole of a Zoom meeting when you could just say, right, I want you to answer this question, hold your phone in landscape and then go for it. And so, it will be difficult to go back to the faff of doing everything properly. However, I think we're all desperate too. We're all desperate to do our best work and to show, what can be done and how it should look. It's not nice when standards slip, is it? Especially when it's not just for, saving money or whatever.
One of my bugbears, and one of the things that I often do is we produce some little content for the school's social media account, and obviously over the course of the pandemic, that's been people doing their own little clips, and it really gets on my nerves when portrait instead of a landscape. It messes up the flow of your video terribly.
It looks dreadful in the edit, doesn't it? Honestly, the pandemic life for me has been, please, can you film this? Make sure you're in landscape. Don't forget to be in landscape. And not everybody does. But, we're on telly, and the telly is a landscape device, isn't it? So, but it's all changing. The way people consume news is changing. Who knows? Who knows what will happen? I'm just going to keep clinging on and doing my best work that I can.
So if you could pick one story that really sticks out in your mind that you thought, wow, that was really exciting the way that story came about, or it was really interesting individual that we were interviewing for that story, what would that be?
Oh, well, there've been loads. There've been absolutely so many interesting people. I did think of a story that I thought might be interesting that involved danger. Because sometimes, you know, as a journalist, the people that you're filming don't want to be on the TV.
Yeah.
And now this is where technology is working against us a little, because if you go into a community that isn't friendly to the media or the police or whatever, quite often people are connected on WhatsApp or, you know, whatever group. And as soon as you're in that community, boom, the message has gone out. Everybody knows you're there. And one day I was sent to a village called Edlington, which is just outside of Doncaster. And the story was their police station, which had been closed for many years, was reopening as a community centre. And, you know, it was a good story, nice story. Interviewed the police, attended the press call. And the police said, now then, we're going on this, we've got to go and do a raid on a house round the corner. Would you like to come with us? And we were like, yes, please. And we arranged for the cameraman to go in the van with the police officers, who were obviously in all their, you know, gear and everything, battering rams in hand. And I was going to drive behind in my little Honda Jazz and sort of, you know, keep up. And we got there and we got to this estate, and they got out, they bashed the door in, and they went in, and they were, I don't know what they were looking for. I think it was drugs related. But yeah, we were getting our footage. It was great. And then this car pulled up, a white car, and 3 people were in it, and they said, oh, what's going on here? And they were ignoring my cameraman and myself, but they were talking to the police. And the police kind of said, oh, you know, go away. And anyway, we filmed a bit longer. They didn't find anything. They came out with one of those petty cash boxes, like a metal cash box, and took it in the back of the police van, and we filmed them opening it. And, oh, it was thrilling. I thought, you know, what's going to be in here? Is it going to be drugs? Is it going to be a gun? And honestly, it was awful. They opened it up, and it was a kid's letter to Santa. It was their Christmas list, and it was in this metal box in this house that God knows what was happening in. And it was an awful moment. And anyway, that was what they got. That was the end of the scene for us. And we drove away, the cameraman and I, in my little Honda Jazz. Anyway, we'd drove a little way, and I realised that this white car that had pulled up at the scene was behind us. And it quickly became apparent that they were following us. And so we did a bit of, you know, corner turn here, corner turn there, and they weren't going away. I was so frightened. It was so intimidating. And eventually we gave them the slip by driving around the back of the old police station and out an exit they couldn't see. But basically it sort of highlighted to me that, you know, whilst a lot of people hear BBC, hear telly, they think, yeah, I want to be on TV, film me. But there's a lot of people who really don't. And when those days come up, it can be quite exciting.
Yeah, it's like a little detective drama all in one there. It's interesting because you said about how, I guess it's the democratization of news in the sense that anyone can go and report. So, you know, when I was a kid, and probably when you were a kid, we didn't have smartphones, and we didn't, you know, the odd person might have a dodgy camcorder that they record their birthday party on or something when they were a little kid, but you couldn't just go out and film something and then stick it out on Twitter and YouTube for the world to see. And I wonder how much does that, yes, it's useful that people can do that. How much does that possibly frustrate you, that you are trained to do this and you have a job which requires you to be impartial and to report things factually, and yet people can put things out on social media with no editorial process, and that can be deemed to be just as valid news as the stuff that you're producing?
You've summed up the situation exactly as it is. We're competing against people who have no editorial standards. I mean, the thing, when you work for the BBC, anybody who has an opinion on the BBC, your friends, your family, they do like to let you know a lot. And, you hear a lot about BBC bias, which it's just not a thing. It's written on the back of our passes. We are impartial, open and honest. Impartiality is at the heart of everything we do. It's written on the back of everybody's work pass, and we all put everything out with both sides of the story as best we can. And if you're offending both sides, it generally means that you're doing it right, and that tends to be how it is. But having editorial standards and knowledge of how to report and how to report legally is really important. And people with a mobile phone, they can cause all sorts of trouble, and they can also, on the other side of the coin, provide amazing footage. They're there at the moment and they film it, and then you've got it, and that's fantastic. So for everything that's great about it, being able to see things that you wouldn't otherwise have been able to see because that people are everywhere and cameras are everywhere, then you also do get people who are outside court naming people in controversial, difficult cases where there are reporting restrictions, and because they don't understand the legality of reporting restrictions around certain crimes, it can be an issue. So it's a constant battle, and our social media team do a great job of finding all the best stuff and getting it all out there. But it's just a different world, isn't it? And it's evolving so fast, and your social media is so important now. And I do feel like a bit of a dinosaur with it all. I try my best with my social media, but it doesn't come naturally because I'm quite private and I don't like to tell everybody my business. Not when everybody can see.
Yeah, some people are surprisingly open with the private information that they divulge in a public sphere. I wonder also, and this is probably more so in the last 5 or 6 years, I'm thinking about President Trump's infamous exchange with the BBC North America correspondent John Steele.
That's another beauty.
Yeah. So, BBC and the whole sort of fake news debate. Do you feel as though the public's trust in the reporting has changed? Do you think people are more skeptical? Do you think people don't sort of trust the BBC as much as they once did?
Oh, it's depressing, but maybe yes. And why? I don't know. I think I don't really want to get into the whole, media landscape. It can be a dark place, and I think, the BBC is such a valuable thing. It's so precious. It's an impartial national broadcaster. It unites the country at times when it needs to be united. It provides inform, educate, entertain. That's what we do. And God, that's precious. And the idea of anything, it being dismantled or taken away is scary to me. And I think people who complain about paying the license fee, and I get it. Maybe you don't watch any BBC, but do you go on the news website? Do you listen to the radio? Maybe some people don't, but I think a lot of people probably do consume at least something from the BBC. And knowing that it is an impartial body is very valuable, because everybody's got an agenda out there, and impartiality is valuable.
Absolutely, and I think maybe it's because I'm sort of a little bit older than maybe sort of the younger generation, and they have a different way of consuming media. But even as a relatively young 42-year-old, I still, if something is happening in the world, if there is an emerging news story, I would still gravitate towards what BBC News as the place where I'm going to get. So when there was the storming of the Capitol building in January, and I actually read about that I think I read about it on, someone posted something on Twitter, New York Times correspondent. The first thing I immediately did was switch BBC on, because I knew that they would be covering it, and I knew that they would have all the people there, and they would be looking at it from both sides. And I think certainly with my historian hat on, I think it's really important that students understand that the way you consume your information is important, because the information may not be correct, and the information may not be impartial, may not be objective. And thinking about historical sources, the media is the first draft of history that's happening, and if people are picking up a distorted draft or a less than impartial draft, then that kind of shapes people's perceptions about things in a dangerous way, I think.
Scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is. All that you can do is educate people in they can consume their news wherever they want, as long as they're aware of, is that news correct,
Yeah.
or is it, there's all sorts, and the internet is so massive. It's scary.
Yeah,
it is scary.
The phrase that was number of students, I saw it on Facebook, which should be followed by in brackets, which doesn't necessarily mean it's true, just because you saw it there. So I was just
going to say, even on Wikipedia, which everyone relies on, that's not really a reliable.
Well, you can write your own. People can put their own things on there, can't they? Can say anything. So when you're not being chased around Yorkshire
that only happened once. I'm usually fine.
by shadowy characters in a white car, and you're not reporting, what does Kathy Booth do to chill out and relax away from news reporting?
Well, I'm probably at heart about 75 years old. So I like knitting, cooking. And my number one thing is playing the piano. I got a piano just about a year and a half ago, and I used to do it as a girl, and honestly, it's the best money I've ever spent. And that's obviously lockdown stuff. In reality, I like going to theme parks, and so maybe that's not so 70-year-old. Maybe I'm a part teenager, part 70-year-old in my interests. I absolutely can't wait to go back to like Alton Towers and eat hot donuts and ride roller coasters, and I love all that. And gigs, I go to loads of gigs. Music's my thing. So that's what I do outside of all of this.
I think people are going to be very excited for I booked some tickets for a Durham 2020 game the other day, and I think people are going to be very excited for live events once we can get back to
when
like
it's
normal.
safe.
I think that's what people have missed a lot of that. So with lockdown still with us for a little bit longer, what do you have as a recommendation for our listeners of either a book and or film and or album that they could explore?
I think I'll go for book-wise, anything by Margaret Atwood. Absolutely love her. Studied Handmaid's Tale when I was at Teasdale School. And all of her work I just love. She does quite a lot of dystopian stuff, which feels quite apt at the moment. So books, get your Margaret Atwood on. And film-wise, honestly, I absolutely love Up, the Disney Pixar film Up.
That's, you're the second Made in Teasdale guest who said that. Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, the reason for me is it's that opening sequence. It's a masterclass of storytelling. It's just, and no matter how many times you watch it, I've seen it dozens of times. I cry every time. The music is perfection. I'm learning the music on the piano now, and it's the visual storytelling, which is such a skill, and the music in a perfect marriage. And then the rest of the film's fun as well, with talking dogs and flying houses and what have you. And what was the other one? Album.
Yeah.
Way before lockdown, I went and saw an artist called St. Vincent, who's from America, and she's absolutely amazing. And honestly, it felt like seeing an early David Bowie. Like, she was so cool. She was so, amazing musician, amazing artist. There was so much artistry in her performance, and it felt so fresh. So get some St. Vincent. I think, Mass Education or anything really by her.
Well, Kathy, it has been a pleasure to have you as a guest in Teasdale. Thank you for giving your time.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you. I'm glad I blew my own trumpet and got in touch with you. I just wanted anybody who's sort of a little bit awkward or a little bit socially anxious at school, as I was, just, shy girls don't get sweets. Have a go, and you can do it. I did, sort of. I'm doing my best.
Good advice. You take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And it is indeed excellent advice at the end there from Kathy. Shy girls don't get sweets, and shy Bens get out. So work hard and take opportunities and seek out opportunities and try and put yourself forward for things that you want to do, and don't be shy and trust in your talent and have a go. And that attitude can lead to many exciting opportunities. So, if you have a story that you'd like to share, as Kathy did, or you know someone who has an interesting story, then please do get in touch. Until next time, take care, stay safe, bye-bye.